Caitlin Boyle. I will moderate our Q&A today. And I'll start off with a couple questions and then open it up to the audience as well. Let's just start by having each of you introduce yourselves and the film and go on.
Well, my name is Rosilio, I'm from Argentina, and I'm one of the directors of this Fracking. I was previously in the script. I hope that I'll fit with this one. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Milton, and I'm from Nicaragua, and I'm one of the directors of Tierra De Leche.
Hi, I'm Fiona, I'm from Maine, and I'm the other director of Tierra De Leche.
Welcome. I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about the origin story of your two projects. How you came to the story, how you came to tell it in the way that you told it. I'm sure it's a long story, maybe a long and winding story, but just a sense of how you came to the project and told it the way you did.
Well, I was working as a digital consultant, digital container consultant for 50 at the time, so there was a need to make a short documentary about how Vaca Muerta was defined. It was initially an idea of the 50-50 Europe team. But when I went there to shoot there with Paula and the director, we realized that there was a bigger story, and so we did that short documentary, but we tried to convince everyone to make a bigger project. But the problem was that we didn't have footage in order to do that, so there was a lot of months of doing research and trying to figure out, okay, what can we do, because we didn't get back to Vaca Muerta to shoot, so it was a struggle because we have like important stuff to make a film, but we lacked everything else, so it was, yeah, so that's why you see everything that you can find online, like found footage, rap. I know, I try to invent anything that I could think of just to elevate the story of these communities, because it's a complex subject, and every time there was someone who knew a lot about it, it was too complicated to make it, very clear what is the problem, why is the problem, why these people are the victims, and why we should do something about it. So,
but that challenge, I think, makes the film what it is, like the interstitial moments of the music, the lyrics,
yes.
Animated, and the Google Maps, aerial footage. I think it helps tell this layered story that maybe you wouldn't have if you had access to like the perfect, fairy tale footage. Or
it's an interesting thing because but I just want to say this. One of the editors, the son of one of the editors was the person who sang the rap. My former singing teacher wrote 2 of the songs that are there, so I tried to grab from things that were close to mine, because I didn't have experience of I didn't start filmmaking, but advertising, so that was, it was a struggle, but eventually did it.
Maybe in our case it's exactly the opposite, perhaps. Like I would say, our project is trying to engage with this minimalist style of everything and figuring out what is the core, the essence of that story, because of the predominance and the knowledge that is perhaps more simplified than like a fracking story in the context of a country, which is the reality of migrant workers in this country, like the stigma and all of the vicissitudes that they go through. And instead we decided to approach also by being outsiders to allow that particular case, to allow us to go deeper into that critical distance, the critical distance with the animals, the critical distance also with a movement that a lot of these workers have also engaged with. So I think a lot had to do with that and how we got into that story. Well, I can just quickly, it comes from a relationship with an organization that is based in Vermont, actually. It's interesting to be in Vermont. It's called Migrant Justice. And Migrant in the past, I've been in connection with another human rights organization based in Maine called Oak Institute for Human Rights. And each year, essentially, they ask they used to ask me, now they're asking us to make these films about like a specific thing. And this year it was this potential collaboration with migrant justice, and that's how it all came to be. I don't know if you want to talk more about the form though.
More about the form, okay, sure. In the context of the question of how we came to this thing, yeah, I think the one thing I'll expand on, and then we can ask more questions, is sort of like to echo the situation, the structure as outsiders, and also the invisibility of these people and their labor, I think especially in New England. I mean, I was coming from that position as someone who grew up in Maine and was not really fully aware of how much like these farms that we think of as like very local and like whatever our image of that is when we drive by them and we see these big, beautiful red barns, and we don't really know all of the ins and outs and the story behind them, and really the people who are there making them run and are the only way that we're able to sustain the dairy industry here, and also the pitfalls of this whole mechanism of power that's making that happen. That makes life for these people very difficult. Yeah, that invisibility was a big guiding principle, I would say, for the film.
I think you related to that. I was curious about how each of you considered the security or safety of your protagonists, given that many of the folks in your film, and certainly in your film, are in precarious situations and perhaps taking a risk by being filmed or interviewed, or speaking truthfully about their experiences. And I wondered how both teams navigated those questions while also trying to tell a story and get it out to the world.
Well, it's complex. I mean, this actually is not. We had a previous cut, and we had to get some of the interviews in to avoid any complications with some of the who were interviewed. And yes, in my case, I tried, even though it was filmed by an NGO, I tried to make an effort to make them speak for themselves and not try to suggest not anything that they didn't say. And of course, tell them, okay, are you okay with this? I tried to do a follow-up at least with some of them. And yes, it wasn't easy because, I mean, even myself, I had to be really careful because, and like meet with lawyers because I'm going against other companies. And I'm exposed to that, and the people who work with the film are exposed as well. So it was, complex, but yeah, it is what it is.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think this is always a big question of any kind of nonfiction work. In our case, sort of the simple answer for us was to not directly tie people's faces to their words, and that was like a direct request from many people that we were working with and talking with, and not such a necessity for other people, but then just to incorporate that into the form of the film entirely seems like the right way to go. And aside from that, is there something else you want to talk about there? I think that's really the main thing.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, it's obviously a negotiation. We entered into these spaces, obviously, with the permission from migrant justice and the relationships that they had built in certain farms. And also, this was shot both in Vermont and in Maine. And these are it's essentially two different countries of what's going on in terms of like the goals and what it's trying to be achieved. And in Maine, like in Vermont, workers can get their driver's license. They also have accomplished a lot of their goals of getting breaks and basic standards of living is abysmal, the difference between Maine and Vermont. Whereas in Vermont, that's really like not the case. So then, because of that, we created this like both amorphous but also semi-abstract relationship with like the pattern drawings that you see and the ways that we try to navigate you from a I don't know, fiction perhaps, where like at the end this factory, these farms are empty. So like it's a little bit of like trying to create like something that's more constructed, and that allows for a certain level of security. And of course, everything was shown, and like no one that didn't want to be in the film is there, or their voices just like.
Are there questions from the audience? Yeah, in the back.
So I have a question. There's an election coming up in Argentina, right? Are there any candidates for president that are in support of sustainability?
Of course not. Which is very sad. I mean, yes, the ones that do kind of mention that, they don't have not a chance. It's so sad.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I work for Sion from 350.org, and the fact that no candidates in Argentina support the environment, and that all of them are favorable to Vaca Muerta, makes the documentary that Rocio directed even more important. So it makes it even more current, more important. It makes this fight even more dangerous as well for the communities, especially if the extreme right-wing candidate wins, which is a possibility.
Right.
So I think this is the perfect moment for the launch of the film and for this premiere because of that. And in 350, this fight continues, and I think the fact that communities are looking for citizens in the developed countries to support them is now even, I mean, this support is now even more important. So this is why having this film here in Vermont, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
This is why having this film is even more important.
Yeah, and just something that's important to mention, this film was premiered here because 350 was born here. And yeah, there's another question there.
Yeah, given this predicament, what about asking the IMF, because Argentina is the largest beneficiary of IMF bailout funds, so that the IMF states that, you know, for you guys to redevelop, sorry, to repay your debt, that it would be made conditional about stopping fracking. Is it something to lift up to at the level of the IMF from Washington, so that you have this outside pressure, you know, onto domestic policy?
Yes. I think I heard right. Sorry, because I'm a bit deaf. But as far as I know, it wasn't one of the causes that the money that Argentina received from IMF should go, among other activities, to the production of oil and gas in Vaca Muerta. So we're kind of stuck in this problem, and I don't see the way out. Unlucky me, but perhaps you can help us in a way, folks.
We'll try.
Yes, there in the back, yeah.
To pick up on your phrase of a way out, there's a deep connection between all three of these films, particularly the last two, and the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, which we celebrated today. Dr. King's vision was not just about civil rights in the U.S., breaking the apartheid in our country, but it was an economic vision. Your films collectively are a devastating portrayal of modern-day capitalism. And I say that with caution because I'm not anti-capitalist and I teach economics here at Miller. But I wondered, Dr. King's vision was a counterweight that is civil society. And in the last two films, we saw that loud and clear, the power of his and the vision of thousands. I wondered if you all could reflect, looking forward, 350's history in mind as well, how you see civil society's counterweight growing. Are you hopeful? And what can be done?
It's a really hard question to answer. Sometimes I can see glimpses of faith in small communities helping each other, and I don't know, but just it's tiny things. I don't. If you ask me, I don't see a big solution, but perhaps if these people who are willing to do something, not just by themselves, but for other people, start to connect in a way, but I don't, for example, in the pandemic, in my neighbor, in my community, like, we supported each other with what we had. And because this is what it is, we only have each other. And I think, yeah, the problem is that we have been like isolated, not because only for the pandemic, but like, you know, we connect via, like, there's always something in the middle between us when we try to have a relationship with each other, and kind of, you need, for example, for me it was, I mean, I edited, I was working with Paula who was editing the film, and I heard these people for every day for a year and a half, and I love them. I care about them, and at some point I said, okay, we said we need to make a film out of this, because I mean, I care about these people not being like this anymore. And I think that's the thing, when you know someone, you care about the person, and you don't want that person to do bad. I don't know how to answer the question, but I think what it means, we need to be close to each other.
May I build on that?
Yes.
Just to introduce myself. I'm Nana. I have the privilege of being on the executive team of 350 Aurora, and therefore I have something of a vantage point because, and this is an important point you raise about capitalism and the hope that we need for communities like the ones that Lucio has, the stories of whom we're seeing in the film. And this autumn, we are as 350 as a global organization, turning our considerable movement strength towards building on the solutions that are already available. In the film, we saw how 21% of renewables could meet the energy needs, right? And that's the kind of pressure we are hoping to build with communities in both the global north and the global south, to start to see how we can create now the movement. We've had tremendous success with divestment. Many of you are probably familiar with the work 350's done in the divestment campaign. We're looking now to leverage that same momentum, that same movement energy towards renewable energies and building a case for renewables and public demand that will be the counterweight to the oil industry and the fossil fuel industry that is based. So that's where we're putting our shoulders to that quota and hoping that films like these will really bring up that kind of emotion in other people as well.
Thank you. Do you guys want to address the question of civil society as a countermeasure?
Yeah, I will just say something real quick. That maybe this last week I was in a conversation about community-centered filmmaking and community-centered practices as well, and it was really interesting because maybe it's a little apparent, but we're coming more from a fine arts practice into like the kind of like activist work that we're trying to engage with as well, and it's really complicated, you know, to think about it in dichotomies and like what's art, what's activism, what's not. I don't know those two things, and a little bit of like what resonated a lot within my colleagues, and I'm just thinking about like, do I believe in this, do I not believe in this, had to do how like some films are not NGOs, but some films can also change, like just like a poem does, a little bit of our brain, a little bit of our stomach, and a little bit of our heart. And I hope that, you know, in this beautiful interwooving of program, you know, these three films that also share similar practices, and like people supporting, you know, the arts and also engaging in these kind of conversations, that there is a little bit of a glimmer of hope. Because a lot of what I've worked over the past few years has been on activist-related films, but always with this edge. But I'm not an activist myself, or I don't consider myself like a frontline person. And I think a little bit of that gives me some guilt, but also some like protection on how to engage with like in these spaces. So I don't know, perhaps that's a way that I can engage with that question.
Maybe we need both artists and activists playing unique roles, right? We should make room for the next screening to come through and the festival team to prepare for that. One last round of applause for our